The holographic display flickered with a grotesque symphony of destruction. Planet after planet blazed with the crimson light of Zorn invasion markers, each point of light representing millions of lives snuffed out in moments. Captain Elena Rodriguez stood before the Galactic Confederation's Emergency Council, her cybernetic left eye, a souvenir from a previous battle, casting a cold blue light across the chamber. 7 systems gone, she announced, her voice a razor-edged whisper that cut through the nervous murmurs of the alien delegates. 7. And you're still discussing diplomatic protocols. The chamber was a nightmare of xenobiology. Crystalline Viraxians with their translucent skin shifted uncomfortably. The silicon-based Kroner representatives clicked their rocky appendages in agitation. A holographic projection of the neural collective, a species of pure energy, wavered with what could only be described as bureaucratic anxiety. Ambassador Turak of the Aquilian Consortium cleared his throat, or whatever passed for a throat on his tentacled species. Captain Rodriguez, we understand your frustration. But a unilateral action could. Could what? Elena interrupted, slamming her augmented hand against the holographic projector. The display fractured momentarily, sending sparks of light dancing across the chamber. Could upset the delicate balance. There is no balance left to upset. The Zorn are systematically eliminating every species that doesn't immediately surrender. Her reputation preceded her. Elena Rodriguez was the only human captain to have survived 3 direct encounters with Zorn warships. The scars that traced her body told a story of survival that most species couldn't comprehend. A jagged line ran from her cybernetic eye down to her jaw, a testament to a battle that should have killed her. The Confederation's military advisor, a crystalline being named Lux 9, projected tactical data. Our analysis suggests a 99.2% probability of total system collapse if direct confrontation occurs. The hologram showed swirling red tendrils consuming star systems like a cancer. Elena's laugh was something between a bark and a challenge. Those are the best odds we've had all week. In that moment, she made a decision that would change the course of the war. The U.S. Defiant, humanity's most advanced warship, would engage the Zorn fleet, with or without the Confederation's support. Prepare the Defiant for immediate deployment, she commanded, her voice carrying the weight of a species that had clawed its way from primitive tribal conflicts to interstellar warfare in a mere few centuries. We're going to remind the Zorn why humanity was never meant to be just another species in this galaxy. The alien delegates stared in stunned silence. Some looked horrified. Others, those who had witnessed human determination before, looked almost hopeful. As Elena turned to leave, Ambassador Turak called out, "Captain, the risks air." She didn't even turn around. Unprecedented. Insane. Suicidal. A slight smile crossed her scared face. Sounds like a typical Tuesday for humanity. The chamber doors hissed open, revealing a corridor filled with human and alien personnel. Word would spread quickly. The Defiant was preparing for war, and humanity was about to show the galaxy exactly what that meant. Outside the massive viewports, stars seemed to hold their breath. Something was coming. Something unprecedented was about to happen. The Zorn Imperium had made a fatal mistake. They had cornered a species that looked most beautiful when backed into impossible situations. Captain Elena Rodriguez was going to war. The engineering bay of the U.S. Defiant was a controlled chaos that would have driven most alien minds to complete breakdown. Holographic schematics danced in midair, complex mathematical equations solving themselves in real time, while components that defied known physical laws were assembled with surgical precision. Dr. Michael Chen moved like a conductor of technological madness, his hands blurring over quantum interface panels. Sweat beaded on his forehead, a mix of caffeine-fueled intensity and pure scientific passion. Around him, a team of the most brilliant human engineers worked with a fervor that bordered on religious devotion. "AI," Chen called out to the ship's AI. "Run another quantum stability simulation on the adaptive shield matrix." The holographic interface shifted, revealing impossible geometries that seemed to breathe and pulse with potential energy. Araya's voice was crisp, almost clinical. Simulation complete. Probability of shield integrity, 73.6%, with a margin of error of 0.02%. Most species would have considered those numbers a failure. For humans, it was a challenge. Not good enough, Chen muttered, adjusting a microscopic quantum coupling that looked more like a piece of abstract art than a piece of military technology. The experimental quantum adaptive shield wasn't just a defensive system. It was humanity's middle finger to the fundamental laws of physics that other species considered immutable. Lieutenant Sarah Nakamura approached, a tablet of refined alien alloy displaying complex weapon schematics. "The plasma compression weapon is ready for final calibration," she reported. The weapon might be too simple a term. It's more like a spatial disruption generator that happens to obliterate anything in its path. Chen grinned. The weapon looked like a nightmare birthed from the marriage of cutting-edge physics and pure human ingenuity. Where alien weapon designs were sleek and predictable, this looked like something that had been conceived in a fever dream and birthed through sheer willpower. Araya's voice cut through the controlled pandemonium. Probability of mission success, 5.7%. The engineering team erupted in laughter. Most species would have been demoralized. Humans saw it as the best odds they'd had all week. "We're not just building a weapon or a shield," Chen explained to a newly transferred alien engineer, a silicon-based croner who looked perpetually confused. "We're creating a statement, a declaration that humanity doesn't play by the rules of warfare established by other species." The croner engineer blinked its multiple crystalline eyes. "But the mathematical improbability." "Improbability is just another word for a challenge," Chen interrupted. Each component of the Defiance experimental systems told a story of human innovation. The quantum adaptive shields could absorb, analyze, and weaponize incoming energy attacks. The plasma compression weapon could create localized spatial disruptions that would tear molecular structures apart at the most fundamental level. "Final system check," Chen announced. The entire engineering team went silent, their collective breath held. Araya's voice rang out. "All experimental systems are within acceptable parameters. Quantum entanglement drive is primed. Adaptive shield matrix is online. Plasma compression weapon is armed and calibrated." The croner engineer leaned closer to Chen. "How are you so calm?" Chen's laugh was something between a bark and a challenge. "Because we're about to do something no one in the galaxy thought was possible." Outside the engineering bay, the vast machinery of the U.S. Defiant hummed with potential. Humanity's most advanced warship was more than a military vessel. It was a technological manifesto, a declaration that in this vast, cold universe, humans would not just survive. They would redefine the very concept of survival. The Zorn Imperium was about to learn a brutal lesson. Humanity didn't just adapt to challenges. They turned challenges into weapons. The bridge of the U.S. Defiant fell into a perfect, razor-sharp silence as Captain Elena Rodriguez initiated the final approach. Outside the viewports, the vast expanse of space transformed into a canvas of potential destruction. Zorn battleships, each the size of a small moon, hung like predatory leviathans, their weapon arrays tracking the comparatively tiny human vessel. "Beethoven's Fifth Symphony," Elena commanded. "Araya, full volume." The first thunderous notes of the symphony erupted through the ship's speakers. Most crews would have found classical music inappropriate for a potential suicide mission. The human crew of the Defiant saw it as the perfect soundtrack. "Micro-jump coordinates are locked," Lieutenant Sarah Nakamura announced, her fingers dancing across holographic interface panels that seemed to anticipate her thoughts. "Quantum entanglement communication channels are stable." Araya's voice was a calm counterpoint to the building musical crescendo. "Calculating approach vectors. Probability of successful penetration of Zorn defensive perimeter, 12.3%. Elena Rodriguez smiled. Those were the best odds they'd had all week. The ship's experimental quantum adaptive drive began to pulse with an energy that defied conventional understanding. Where other species saw faster-than-light travel as a linear process, humans had discovered it was more of a suggestion. The Defiant could compress space-time, creating micro-jumps that would look like teleportation to less advanced civilizations. All departments, battle stations, Alina commanded. Let's remind the Zorn why humanity was never meant to be just another species in this galaxy. The first Zorn battleships began to turn, their massive weapon arrays charging with enough energy to vaporize entire planetary systems. Standard tactical doctrine would suggest retreat. The Defiant did something else entirely. It accelerated directly toward the heart of the Zorn fleet. Lieutenant Nakamura's hands blurred across the tactical systems. Quantum shield harmonics are fluctuating. Adaptive response is tracking at 86% efficiency. Dr. Michael Chen's voice crackled over the communication system from engineering. Keep those harmonics tight. We're about to do something stupid. The classical music reached a crescendo just as the first Zorn energy weapons fired. Most ships would have been obliterated in milliseconds. The Defiant seemed to dance, performing spatial maneuvers that looked more like an impossible ballet than military tactics. Micro-jump in 3, Araya announced. 2, 1. Space itself seemed to fold around the Defiant. One moment, the ship was directly in the path of multiple planet-killing weapon arrays. The next moment, it was somewhere else entirely, but not through any conventional faster-than-light travel. The Zorn weapon crews looked at their targeting systems in confusion. Where was the target? How could a ship simply vanish? On the bridge of the Defiant, Captain Rodriguez allowed herself a moment of pure, savage satisfaction. They've never faced an enemy that can rewrite the fundamental rules of engagement, she murmured. The impossible approach had begun, and the Zorn Imperium was about to learn that humanity's most dangerous weapon was never technology. It was imagination. The first Zorn ships began to die in ways they could not comprehend. Lieutenant Sarah Nakamura's laughter cut through the tension on the Defiance bridge, a sound both terrifying and triumphant. They have no concept of what's happening to them, she announced, her fingers dancing across holographic targeting systems that seemed to pulse with living intelligence. The quantum adaptive shields did more than deflect energy. They absorbed, analyzed, and weaponized incoming attacks with a precision that violated everything known about defensive systems. Each massive energy blast from the Zorn battleships, weapons capable of turning entire planetary surfaces to molten glass, was instead consumed, broken down, and transformed. Adaptive feedback loop at 92% efficiency, Araya reported. The ship's AI voice carried a tone that almost sounded like excitement. Captain Alina Rodriguez watched the tactical display with a predator's focus. The Zorn battleships were dying not to conventional weapons, but to their own technological arrogance. Each attack they launched became a vector for their own destruction. Dr. Michael Chen's voice crackled over the communication system from engineering. The quantum adaptive matrix is performing beyond our most optimistic simulations. We're literally turning their weapon technology against them in real time. Massive Zorn ships began to disintegrate in ways that defied physical comprehension. Molecular structures unraveled, energy signatures collapsed, entire weapon systems turned inside out. It wasn't just destruction, it was a fundamental deconstruction of their technological paradigm. They've never encountered an enemy that doesn't just defend, Alina murmured, but actively transforms their attack into a weapon. The bridge crew watched in a mix of horror and exhilaration. Humans had always been good at adaptation, but this was something else entirely, a technological judo that turned an enemy's strength into a fatal weakness. A junior tactical officer, barely 25, with eyes wide with the madness of combat, turned to Nakamura. How are we doing this? Nakamura's smile was sharp enough to cut tungsten. We're not just fighting. We're rewriting the fundamental rules of warfare. The Zorn communication channels erupted in a panic that translated across species. Confusion, terror, incomprehension. Their most advanced weapon systems were being consumed, analyzed, and weaponized faster than their computational systems could process. Zorn Battlegroup Alpha is experiencing total systems collapse, ARIA reported. Estimated time to complete molecular disassembly, 47 seconds. Captain Rodriguez leaned forward. Show them what humanity looks like when cornered. The Defiant's experimental weapon systems charged, not with conventional energy, but with something far more terrifying. A weapon that didn't just destroy, but fundamentally reimagined the concept of destruction. First blood had been drawn, and the Zorn Imperium was about to learn that humanity's most dangerous weapon was never technology. It was the ability to turn the impossible into a strategy. Warfare, Captain Elena Rodriguez knew, was never just about physical destruction. It was about breaking an enemy's will to fight. The Zorn communication network lit up like a panicked nervous system. Araya, the Defiant's AI, began to work her most insidious magic. Where most combat systems would jam or block enemy communications, Araya did something far more devastating. She began to subtly alter their own encrypted channels. Initiating psychological warfare protocol, Araya announced, her voice clinical and cold. Estimated breakdown of Zorn command structure, 94.7%. Dr. Michael Chen leaned over the communication systems, a manic grin spreading across his face. We're not just fighting them. We're making them fight themselves. The subtle alterations were genius in their simplicity. A command here slightly mistranslated, an order there with just enough ambiguity to create doubt. ARIA was creating a symphony of mistrust that would make the most paranoid intelligence systems look like naive children. Zorn battle groups began to turn on each other. Commanders received conflicting orders. Entire fleet segments started to believe they were under attack by their own forces. The highly structured, hierarchical Zorn society, which prided itself on absolute communication and control, was being torn apart from within. Lieutenant Sarah Nakamura tracked the disintegration of the Zorn command structure with a clinical detachment that bordered on art. Look at how quickly a rigid system collapses when introduced to genuine chaos, she murmured. Captain Rodriguez understood something fundamental about warfare that most species missed. Physical destruction was temporary. Psychological destruction was permanent. Araya, Elena commanded, broadcast their own most secure communication channels, but add just enough distortion to create maximum uncertainty. The AI's response was instantaneous. Zorn communication channels began to leak, not completely, not obviously, but with just enough confusion to create maximum paranoia. Encrypted messages were subtly altered. Command structures began to fragment. A junior communications officer watched in stunned fascination. We're basically gaslighting an entire alien civilization. Chen's laugh was something between a bark and a scientific revelation. We're demonstrating the fundamental weakness of any system that cannot handle genuine unpredictability. The Zorn had built their entire military doctrine on absolute control, precise communication, and hierarchical decision-making. Humanity's approach was the exact opposite. Adaptive, chaotic, driven by individual initiative and collective creativity. Araya continued her psychological warfare with machine precision. Zorn command structure experiencing 42% communication breakdown. Estimated total collapse in 17 minutes. On the bridge, the human crew watched with a mixture of professional detachment and savage satisfaction. They weren't just fighting a war. They were demonstrating a fundamental truth about intelligent systems. Rigidity breaks. Adaptability survives. They thought technology was their greatest weapon. Captain Rodriguez murmured. They never understood that the human mind is the most dangerous weapon in the universe. The Zorn Imperium was about to learn that some battles are lost long before the first shot is fired, and some enemies rewrite the very rules of engagement. The Aurelian resistance emerged from the shadows like a ghost of defiance. Their leader, Krelix, watched the Defiance battle with eyes that burned with an intelligence far beyond what the Zorn had ever anticipated. Where other species saw technological primitive beings, Kralix saw an opportunity. "They're not just fighting," he muttered to his closest lieutenants. "They're rewriting the entire concept of resistance." Captured Zorn communication frequencies became a lifeline. Using fragments of human tactical innovations intercepted during the battle, Kralix began to coordinate a resistance movement that would spread like wildfire across occupied territories. The Zorn had systematically conquered planets, believing them to be nothing more than resources to be harvested. They never understood that oppression creates something far more dangerous than mere rebellion. Dr. Michael Chen's tactical broadcasts, initially designed for the Defiant's internal communication, became an unexpected blueprint for resistance. Encryption methods, adaptive communication protocols, methods of turning limitations into strengths. These were now being studied and implemented by species the Zorn considered conquered. "It's like watching a technological virus," Araya observed, tracking the spread of human-inspired resistance tactics. Resistance is no longer a local phenomenon. It's becoming a galactic movement. Kralix understood something profound. Warfare wasn't about overwhelming force. It was about adaptability, courage, and the willingness to reimagine the impossible. Lieutenant Sarah Nakamura noticed the first signs of the spreading resistance. "They're using our communication disruption techniques," she announced on the Defiance Bridge. "But they're adapting them to their own technological capabilities." Captain Alina Rodriguez saw more than just a tactical advantage. She saw the birth of something revolutionary. "We're not just fighting a war," she murmured. "We're teaching an entire galaxy how to resist." The Aurelian communication networks began to transform. Simple radio signals became complex quantum-entangled message systems. Primitive defense networks evolved into adaptive resistance platforms. Species that the Zorn had considered pacified were now learning to fight back, not with the Zorn's technology, but with something far more dangerous: human-inspired innovation. Kralix transmitted a message that would be intercepted by resistance movements across multiple star systems. "We are no longer fighting to survive," the message read. "We are fighting to transform." The Zorn had made a fatal mistake. They had introduced a species, humanity, that didn't just fight wars. They revolutionized the very concept of resistance. And now, that revolution was spreading. One captured frequency at a time. The Defiant was bleeding. Quantum adaptive shields flickered like a dying heartbeat. Critical systems reported massive structural damage. But damage to a human vessel was just another opportunity. Dr. Michael Chen's quantum compression drive was a weapon of last resort, a technology so dangerous that its very conception was considered madness by every scientific body in the Galactic Confederation. It wasn't just a weapon. It was a fundamental challenge to the laws of physics themselves. "Omega Protocol is ready," Araya announced, her AI voice carrying a tone that bordered on something almost like excitement. "Estimated probability of total system survival, 0.03%. Captain Alina Rodriguez didn't hesitate. "Initiate." The bridge crew knew what was coming. They had trained for this, prepared for this. A moment where survival wasn't just unlikely, it was mathematically improbable. The quantum compression drive began to pulse. Not with energy, not with conventional physics, but with something that existed in the liminal space between possibility and impossibility. Lieutenant Sarah Nakamura's hands danced across the control systems. "Spatial harmonics are destabilizing," she reported. Her voice was calm, professional, as if she were reporting nothing more consequential than the weather. Outside the ship's viewports, space itself began to twist. It wasn't an explosion. It wasn't a weapon discharge. It was a fundamental reimagining of spatial reality. Zorn battleships, massive technological monstrosities that had conquered entire star systems, began to freeze in place. Not metaphorically, literally. Molecular structures suspended between existence and non-existence. "Full quantum entanglement cascade," Chen shouted from engineering. "We're basically creating a momentary reset of local spacetime." The Defiant pushed beyond every known limitation of its experimental technology. Humans had always been good at breaking rules. Now they were rewriting the fundamental laws of the universe. Araya's voice cut through the controlled chaos. Spatial disruption at 99.7% efficiency. Zorn fleet is experiencing total systemic arrest. It looked like a moment of impossible art. Thousands of massive battleships, frozen in a single moment. Their crews trapped between breaths. Their weapon systems suspended in a heartbeat of potential energy. Status of the Defiant, Elena demanded. Nakamura's response was succinct. We're alive. Barely. Chen's laughter echoed through the communication systems, the sound of a scientist who had just done something everyone said was impossible. We didn't just win a battle, Elena Rodriguez murmured, watching the frozen Zorn fleet. We just rewrote the fundamental understanding of warfare. The quantum compression drive pulsed one final time, a heartbeat of pure, impossible potential. Humanity had entered the fight, and nothing would ever be the same again. Silence. Then, a heartbeat. The spatial disruption cleared like a fever dream dissolving into reality. Zorn ships hung like dead monuments, their crews trapped in a moment between existence and non-existence. The Defiant, scorched and barely holding together, represented something far more profound than a mere warship. It was a statement. Captain Elena Rodriguez stood on the bridge, watching as the Galactic Confederation's surviving vessels began to understand that everything had changed. Her cybernetic eyes scanned the impossible battlefield, processing data faster than any organic system could comprehend. Araya, she called, full tactical assessment. The AI's response was instantaneous. Zorn fleet, 97.3% neutralized. Resistance movements across 7 star systems now active. Estimated galactic power shift. Complete paradigm transformation. Dr. Michael Chen stumbled onto the bridge, his engineering uniform torn and scorched. We did it, he muttered, half laughing, half in shock. We actually did it. Lieutenant Sarah Nakamura's fingers danced across the remaining functional holographic displays. The quantum compression drive didn't just stop the Zorn, she reported. It created a cascading effect. Their entire military infrastructure is experiencing a systemic collapse. Outside the viewports, something remarkable was happening. The frozen Zorn ships weren't just disabled. They were becoming something else entirely. Resistance movements on occupied planets were seizing control, using the momentary disruption to break free from decades of oppression. Krelix, the Aurelian resistance leader, transmitted a message that would be remembered throughout galactic history. We are no longer victims, the transmission read. We are architects of our own future. The Defiant itself was a testament to human innovation, barely holding together, scorched beyond recognition, yet still functional. Still fighting. We're more than just a species, Elena murmured, more to herself than anyone else. We're a force of fundamental transformation. Araya's voice carried a tone that almost, sounded like pride. Tactical analysis complete. The battle is won, but the war of transformation has just begun. Chen looked at the frozen Zorn fleet. They thought technology was their greatest weapon, he said. They never understood that imagination is the most dangerous force in the universe. On 1,000 worlds, species that had been conquered, subjugated, and forgotten began to rise. They had watched a single human warship do what entire galactic armies could not. They had seen possibility reimagined. Captain Rodriguez allowed herself a moment of savage satisfaction. The Zorn Imperium would spend generations trying to understand how a single ship had turned an inevitable conquest into a catastrophic defeat. Prepare for potential follow-up operations, she commanded. And someone get me a cup of coffee. We got a galaxy to reshape. The Defiant drifted among the frozen monuments of a dying empire. Not as a victor, but as a promise. Humanity had entered the fight, and nothing would ever be the same again. Epilogue. The Zorn Imperium would learn that some enemies don't just fight wars. They'd redefine them.